Hey, are you a business owner, entrepreneur, or professional? If so, we want you to apply to be a featured guest on our show. My name is Adam Torres, and I host the Mission Matters series of podcasts. I've recorded over 3,000 episodes, and we are just getting started. How do you know if you'd be a good guest to be on the show? Well, only one way to find out, and that's to apply, but I'm going to let you in on a little secret. We want guests that have a story to tell, guests with a brand, a product, or a service that can benefit my audience of listeners. If this sounds like you, go to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. I'd love to talk to you and get to know more about your story. Again, head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, now let's get into the show. Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so I have Steve Thompson on the line, and he's managing partner at Value Lifecycle. Steve, welcome to the show.
Adam, it's a pleasure to be here.
All right, Steve. So this is going to be fun. So I know one of the things that you're passionate about and that you're working on day in and day out is really working with sales executives and helping them close great deals. So some of the people watching this right now, I know that already hooked them. That's what I was trying to do. So stay tuned, and we're going to get into how Steve is doing that and some of the things behind it that's making what he does so effective. And just to get this started, Steve, I like to start the show like we start them all with our signature question. So Steve, we at Mission Matters, we amplify stories for entrepreneurs, executives, and experts. So that's our mission here. Steve, what mission matters to you?
Well, Adam, what I am really passionate about and focused on is ensuring that deals that are being closed, are good for both the buying organization as well as the selling organization. And at the risk of sounding really altruistic on this topic, I'm a capitalist at heart. I believe that successful businesses can do more good for people in society than just about anything else. And when you look at the deals that are being done, there seems to be this preconceived notion that, deals are predominantly only good for one side, and that's absolutely a myth. The deals can be good for both sides. And when they are, both organizations, and the data is pretty clear on that, are more successful. And more successful companies can hire more people and create more opportunities as they grow. They have additional cash that they can use for philanthropic efforts. Mm-hmm. So, there's a lot of good to be had from it. And so that's really what my mission is ensuring that we're closing great deals that are good for both parties in a business dealing.
Man, you got me all fired up over here. Who doesn't like closing great deals? This is good. So awesome. Love bringing mission-based entrepreneurs and executives on the line. And you're obviously one of those. So let's just get this kicked off. So let's start with your background. Like, how did you get started on this journey?
Well, I'm not going to take you all the way back to when I first got out of college. I was in the Navy. In fact, I guess I am, right? I was in the Navy. I was a Navy nuclear submarine officer, which has nothing to do with this because the Navy's not good at negotiating, and they're pretty much, one directional on that. Mm-hmm. But at the time, I was VP of Sales and Marketing for a Fortune 100 company. And I was getting my MBA at Northwestern University. Mm-hmm. And going through this program, we went through in cohorts. And one of my, within my cohorts was an individual. He was also VP of Sales and Marketing for a very large company. And we went through a course called Negotiations. And it was called Rational Negotiations. And for the first time in my career, this topic of negotiating actually had some science behind it. And this was based on research that had been started 20 years ago at Harvard. And we both looked at each other and said, man, we could make a business out of this because negotiations have been treated as a black art. And in fact, we did. We approached the professor and took the intellectual property and started the business. And literally within 18 months, we looked at each other and we're like, we're two guys and a dog. And look at this, we got 3 Fortune 100 clients and off we went. And what transpired from there is that we were going into customers and we were both training them on how to think about negotiations differently. But I was being pulled more and more into consulting with account teams on real deals.
Yeah.
And this was on the selling side. And as I'll share with you in a moment, the business also moved over to the buying side. And the negotiation is one of these really interesting points in a business relationship. It's what I call one of the critical pressure points, where either all the good things you've done are going to pay dividends, or all the sins you've committed are going to come home to roost. And by the way, when I'd get a call to consult on a deal, it was never because it was going well, right? It was on fire. And after about a dozen times doing this, what I soon realized is, wait a minute. We don't have a negotiation problem here. We got a much bigger issue further back upstream. Or if we're selling to an existing customer, we've got another big issue that's getting in the way. And both of those issues surround value. Meaning on the selling side, we didn't really create the potential for value for the customer. We were just pushing our product, our technology, our services, what have you. And we wonder why when we get to the negotiation, they're beating the crap out of us on price. Well, that's what we said it was going to be about, right? But even worse is when we're selling to an existing customer, and sometimes we may have had them for a decade or more, and we didn't know the value we delivered to them. And by the way, they don't either. Because you see, they don't sit around thinking about us. They're thinking about their business. And when they've spent a lot of money with us and they're not sure of the value they've gotten, they become pretty sure they've spent too much. So, this negotiation is going to be really tough. So that's what kind of evolved to this critical insight, that, wait a minute, guys, at the end of the day, value is the currency of business relationship. It's the currency of selling. It's the currency of account management. And it's probably the most misunderstood concept in business. And that's what fascinated me about it.
So, we're going to go back into the idea of value and what that looks like. And we'll go deeper into this, but I want to take a step back just for a moment. So, here you are, you're starting on this path, you got your business going, obviously. So there's some people watching this that they're not quite as far along in that journey. Maybe they're on their first business. Maybe they're on their second. First one didn't go so well, right? What kind of advice would you give those that are kind of just getting started on that entrepreneurial side of things?
Well, I will tell you, this is my third business, by the way, in this space. And I think the one piece of advice that I can give you is that you've got to be flexible. You've got to understand what's changing with the target market that you're trying to address, and you're going to have to adapt accordingly. It's something I remind my clients all the time. It's like, guys, we can't keep walking in the door with the answer when we don't know what the question was. Okay. And salespeople do that, by the way, a lot. And that by being flexible, and I'll share a story with you during this period when I was doing a lot of consulting on deals, working with account teams. And by the way, some of these deals were going to show up on the 10K and the 10Q of both the selling organization and the buying organization. So there were a lot of zeros involved. And I had the senior vice president of a major client pulled me aside and he said, Steve, look, we love the work you do. The training is, phenomenal. We love the consulting, but I tell you, when you work with account teams on deals, we get more value out of that than anything else.
Wow.
And he goes, by the way, you're not charging enough for it. Now, I just cracked up because I said, his name was Dave. I go, Dave, look, I've been in sales a long time. I've never had a client tell me that my price was too low. Okay. And I go, this is going to make a great story that I can share with other clients in the future. Well, within 4 months, I had almost an identical conversation with the chief purchasing officer of another Fortune 100 company, and I was working with them on the buying side. Now, I'm not the smartest guy, in the world, but I could kind of see the trend and I can connect the dots there. And I determined that, there's probably more value in this for my clients than, doing the traditional work I'd been doing. So I started another company, and it was focused just on that. Invariably, we had to do some training and things to get people to start, shifting their mindset and looking at things differently, and to have a common language. But that's been, the preponderance of the work that I've been doing now. In that company, it was, really working on up to getting the deal closed. And that was both on the selling side and the buying side. But then the evolution of something as a service, really started taking hold. And now I had an opportunity to jump on that really big bogeyman, if you will, what I call the killer question that I knew was getting asked on the buying side. And that was, man, we've spent all this money with this particular company. What have we gotten for it?
Yeah.
And the reason I call that the killer question is, if there's a clear, crisp answer on, look, here's the value they've delivered, then it's like, okay, carry on. Okay, we're done here. But the vast majority of the time, there was not a clear answer.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, as a supplier, you got a big target painted on you. And by the way, the key individual that brought you in politically has a target painted on him or her.
For sure.
And so, when you get to a reoccurring revenue model, now we're really getting to what's important to the customer at the end of the day. Because while sellers sell for a living, they often forget customers don't buy for a living. Okay, they're in the business of their business. And the biggest disconnect that exists between selling and buying organizations is that buyers are ultimately aiming for a new and improved outcome. That's why they're spending money. Sellers are satisfied with just selling to a closed deal, booking the business, cashing the commission check, and going on. And look, I've worked in over 24 industries. This applies universally across the board. But you look within the technology industry and this advent of, again, something as a service, recurring revenue model, suddenly this last phase of delivering the value, and by the way, getting credit for delivering it is critical for your business model. And so that's what evolved to my third company and the one that I'm in now, Value Lifecycle. Because really have to look at managing value all the way back from the marketing messaging to the sales value prop to the deals that are closed. But then you got to go in and make sure you deliver on that value and get credit. It isn't any good as a seller if you're a hero in your mind. You got to have the customer look you in the eye and say, yep, we got the value or more than we were expecting. That's when you get painless renewals, you get enthusiastic referrals, and you're going to have a sales pipeline chock full of upsell and cross-sell opportunities. And as you know, the easiest sale in the world is to an existing happy customer. And awesome. Life's good for everybody.
So Steve, and this is awesome. And I feel like you're giving a bit of a master class here on sales, really for high tech sales executives. And when I think about like some of the prep that we did in this interview, and you're very specific about one thing, and that was when we talk about, I think I might have to change the word when I was going over this, is we were talking about how to close good deals is what I said, and you said no, Adam, that's not what I do. You said it's how to close great deals.
Yes.
Can you define to me like what makes a great deal?
Yes. And by the way, some people might call this aspirational. But I will tell you that if you aim low, you're always going to hit low, right? And usually lower, like shoot yourself in the foot. And it doesn't mean we're always going to hit this target of a great deal, but if we never aim for it, the odds are we never will. So this is how I define a great deal. It's good for the selling organization and that it advances their business strategy. Number two, it's good for the buying organization in that it addresses their particular buying needs. But then number three, and this is probably the most important attribute, it's got the right mix of products, services, et cetera, with the right volumes that will allow both sides to ultimately deliver on that promised value. And so those are the criteria that I have for determining what a great deal is.
Fantastic. Let's go further into value life cycle. So I want to start, we've talked about some of the things you work on from a high level. I want to get a little granular. So first off, what types of clients do you find get the best value out of working with you and your team? So it could be like, is it only for big companies like enterprise? Is it also for small business, mid-size? Let's start there. Like, what type of clients typically get the most value out of working with you and your team?
Well, my client base does range from the Fortune 100 down to technology startups. And in fact, right now, I've got a number of startups that I'm working with to help them get through to some liquidation event, whether it's an IPO or being purchased. And really the sweet spot, I would say for me, when you look at any, and this is in the B2B space, by the way, okay, that's where I specialize. When you look at any, B2B company, you can stratify their customer base. And it's, roughly the 80-20 rule, meaning about 20% of their customers represent 80% of their revenue.
Yeah.
And for most of my clients, that's where they bring me in, is to address that really critical portion of their install base or their customer base, if you will. And by the way, since those are typically much larger companies and they do typically much larger deals, they're usually pretty poor deals for the seller.
Yeah.
Okay, the buyer is leveraging their size, their purchasing power, et cetera. And so, you've got 80% of your revenue that's really not that good, okay, from a quality standpoint. And so it's really any company that is, in the B2B space. Predominantly now I am in the technology sector.
Yeah.
Because I found the opportunity there is overwhelming relative to a lot of other industries. And the main reason is in the technology sector, everybody's in love with their technology. And the problem is their customers aren't so much in love with the technology. They're more in love with what it can do for them, right? What are the outcomes that they can produce? And so for me, it's a really rich environment to be doing what I'm doing. I work with the marketing departments with these companies, to help them tweak their value messaging from a, feature function, bits, bytes, feeds, speeds focus to, wait a minute, outcomes, okay, for the customer. What does this mean? Same thing on the selling side. Get the selling motion away from features and functions to, this is what it's going to mean to you. Okay. And these are the outcomes that, by the way, we're prepared to get in the boat and row with you to that distant shore, of success. So that's pretty much what my focus is right now.
So you work right now with a lot of different tech companies, and I feel like, and what you said, I completely agree with. Everybody's in love with their own tech, but I feel like has the buying cycle, or has that changed? Is it becoming like harder to buy, or is it easier? Like give me a feel for that buyer cycle side of things, because especially with tech companies, bigger, products, bigger dollar amounts, bigger value propositions, also many times. Tell me more about that.
Sure, and I think you really danced around the core issue here on the technology side, and that is that the reality is selling is becoming much harder, but the reason it's becoming much harder is buying is just overwhelming organizations. Okay. It is incredibly hard to buy and make an informed decision. And technology today is ubiquitous. When I get in front of a client and I ask them, okay, it's 2021, and you look at your technology infrastructure, or you're selling to a customer, how critical are the data in the applications to the operation of that business on a scale of 1 to 10?
Yeah.
Well, it's an 11 for just about any business. Okay. Yes. It's absolutely critical. And then when I ask them, well, how do you use that? How do you use it, or how do they use the technology to run your business and make money? Then it starts getting a lot fuzzier. Okay. And it's like, no. See, Steve, you don't understand. We just sell this really cool technology. And I said, no, I do understand. Okay. But your customers don't buy really cool technology. They're buying better business outcomes, because everybody right now who's in a critical decision position on the customer side, they came of age in the late 90s and the early aughts, where companies were spending money like drunken sailors on technology.
Yeah.
And if you were on the sales side, it was a great time to be in sales, okay?
Yeah.
Because companies were just buying huge amounts of technology until we hit 9/11, until we hit, the big mortgage crisis in 07, 08. And suddenly the brakes went on, and the companies that have been buying pulled back and said, again, that killer question, wait a minute, we just spent billions of dollars. What are we getting for this? And then you look at the success rate for technology rollouts, which is abysmal. Okay. And the value delivered, and they became a lot more cautious. And in becoming cautious, they also understood that, this is the future of our business. And suddenly it no longer sat in the IT department.
Yeah.
And in fact, in the US today, technology decisions, over 60% of them are made by the business. That's who's driving the decision. And they don't speak technology. Okay? They speak business. But there's more and more of them involved. So on the buying side, you've got, the numbers range from 7 to, 14, depending on whose research you're looking at. Decision makers are involved on the buying side. Now, imagine getting 7, much less 14 people in a room and getting them to agree on anything. Okay. And now layer on top of this, COVID-19 and this virtual selling motion that's going on. And the key thing that's happening now is most of the selling is happening when the salesperson's not in the room.
Yeah.
It's his or her champion that is selling on their behalf. Now, with all the technology available today, the potential customer can go online. They can do incredible amounts of research into your company, your products, your services, other companies who've bought them. And yet the selling motion that most people tried to adopt in this virtual environment was, okay, I'm going to do the same thing I was doing in person. I'm just going to do it virtually.
Yeah.
And basically, I'm just going to be a 2-legged brochure. Okay. But in this case, I'm a one-headed brochure on a screen. And I'm just going to spout out all this stuff they already know.
Yeah.
And in fact, they're overwhelmed by what they know. And as I remind my selling clients, I go, the most important question to any buyer, and they cannot Google the answer to this, and this is why you exist as a salesperson.
Yeah.
The most important question is, who understands me and what I'm trying to accomplish?
Yes.
That's what a buyer wants to get answered. And if you're not focused on answering that as a salesperson, burying them with more white papers and more data, and the fact that we're Gartner upper right quadrant and all that, nobody cares on the business side. Okay. And they're the ones predominantly making the decision. So you're spot on. The issue today is not one of selling, it's one of buying. How do you make it easier for customers to make an informed decision?
So you brought this up couple times here, and maybe you go through this pretty flawlessly. So you're on the buying and the selling side. I don't know if the audience picked that up, but I think that's something that's very unique about your model and what you're able to accomplish. So how this come about? Because most people are either on the buying side or the selling side, but you do both for your clients.
Yes. And typically, by the way, it's rare that I have a client that I'm working with the sales organization and the procurement organization. But you are correct. I work on both sides of the fence. And it's interesting to me. And by the way, on the buying side, I got started the same way as the selling side. They brought me in, said, Steve, we've got negotiation issues. We need you to help us become better negotiators.
Right.
Well, I'd get in there. And again, it wasn't a negotiation issue. What here's a typical example of chief purchasing officer give me a call and said, Steve, I need you to come in here and work with my team. They got a negotiation problem. And I go, well, okay, how do you know? Man, we're just not getting the pricing that we want to get, from these suppliers. So I'm like, okay, I've seen this rodeo before, and I'll show up and dig into it. And the truth of the matter was, they didn't understand what a good deal or even a great deal looked like to them. Okay. They were defaulting to, look, if I can get it for a lower price. And I go, wait a minute, guys, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars here. And I get price is important. But if you're going to spend that kind of money, what are the real outcomes you're trying to achieve? And let's start with the end in mind and back into what this deal ought to look like. Okay. And so I would spend 75% of my time working with buying organizations on helping them figure out what are they really trying to accomplish, where are they really trying to go, and then determine what does this great deal look like. And look, price is always a part of it, but it by no means even hits the top 5 in most instances. I'll give you, this is a rare occasion where I had a client, I was working on the selling side, and they were looking to do an acquisition, and they brought me into the buying side. There was a European multinational that was looking to, not divulge, they were looking to sell or spin off, a subsidiary. And my client was looking to buy that subsidiary. And they pulled me in, and they had a war room set up, Adam. I mean, you'd have been impressed. There were
like the movies.
Whiteboards everywhere. Yeah. And, I mean, I've been to Northwestern. It's a pretty good school and got my MBA. So I understand they're doing, net present value of future cash flows. And then they're looking at book value of assets. And they've got all this stuff there. And they said, well, what do you think? And I go, well, I don't know. Let me just ask a question. Why are they selling? It kind of got quiet, and it was like, well, they don't want to be in this business anymore. And I go, okay, but why? Steve, I don't know. They just, it's for sale, and we're interested in it. And I said, yeah, that doesn't give us much to go on here, and I really kept pushing that point. It was, and I'll never forget it. It was an executive assistant who was doing some work there in the war room. And she jumped up and she goes, listen to this. And she pulled up, and this was an earnings call where the CEO of that European company made a commitment to shareholders that he was going to have that business spun off before the end of the current quarter. And by the way, we just entered into that quarter. And I looked at everybody and I go, so, all right, guys, how many people are knocking down the door to buy this thing? They said, well, Steve, we're not aware of anybody who's looking to buy it. And I go, so what do you think it's going to be worth it to the CEO to sell this thing, to have the deal inked before the quarter's over?
Wow.
And they're like, whoa. And I said, now you guys do have the funding in place, right? And they assured me, and I go, well, we're going in with a lot lower number. Okay. And the value we're going to bring him is we're going to close this deal. Now, of course, the entire deal is going to last, but he's going to be able to publicly announce it. It'll be inked before the end of this quarter. And we did. We ended up buying that company for a fraction of what we were calculating it could be worth.
Absolutely amazing. It's a great story. And that just goes to show too, like the difference between knowing the why and like taking that going a little bit deep. What does a relationship usually look like to work with you and your team for a company? Like take me through kind of like the just the onboarding, just like what it looks like.
Sure. Well, because what I do is somewhat intangible. Okay. The way it typically starts is with a fixed price engagement to go work on a critical deal, whether it's the buying side or the selling side. And they want to see that if I can come in there, work within their culture, their organization, their people, if I can move the needle on a deal. And that's the way that it typically starts. And then once we get over that hurdle, then they're like, well, wait a minute, we don't want to keep paying that much. Okay. Because we got a lot of deals that we'd like to maybe have you help us with, and it generally evolves then to a retainer, and it's a retainer that's got flexibility built into it, so that look, it's not unusual for me to be on a call early in the morning with a team over in Europe, in the afternoon with teams here in the U.S., and then in the evening with teams over in APJ. That flexibility needs to be built into the arrangement. Plus, it may involve both. And I used to, by the way, prior to COVID, I mean, I've got over 5 million miles on Delta Airlines, and my goal is not to hit 6 million. And by the way, I think I'm okay on that now.
That's so much.
But, this used to be in person. I would fly into a city, and I would spend when it was overseas trips. A lot of times these companies would take me overseas 2-3 weeks at a time, and we'd get hit. We'd hit all the major offices, whether they're in Europe, Asia, whatever. I think I've done 4 around the world trips. Okay, wow. Single trips that were going around the world. But anyway, the retainer basis allows me to both work on deals, to consult and help them, with their overall strategy. Now, there's a lot of other people that are much better at strategy than I am, but what I try to do is make strategy street level. And what I mean by that is, let's say for a selling organization, if this is your business strategy, I kind of use the metaphor of the wall. You're going to accomplish this. And if you think of a wall, it's got bricks or stones in there. Those represent every deal. And you're either going to do the right kind of deals that are the right size and shape and have plenty of mortar around them, and you're going to build a tall, straight, strong wall, or every deal is going to be a one-off, and you're trying to slap this thing together. And I've been in front of executives, and I'll tell them, I go, show me over the last 6 months the deals you've closed, and I'm going to show you what your real strategy is.
Yeah.
Okay. Because at the end of the day, it's a deal at a time that you're advancing the strategy. So I can work at that level down to consulting on deals. And then finally, the final way that clients will engage with me is on a performance or contingent basis. And that is, we'll come up with mutually agreed to metrics on what we're moving the needle on, whether they're on a particular deal or a group of deals or even, the whole enterprise. And by the way, I don't go 100% contingent because I want everybody to have some skin in the game. Those are basically the ways that I engage with clients.
And it makes sense because you're putting yourself on the same side of the table as the clients, what it comes down to, and specifically working with. And I kind of want, because I see the way you develop the system. I see also the revenue model. And speaking of revenue models and working with these tech companies and these tech executives, so big deal in the industry overall. I'd say reoccurring revenue models, pretty straightforward there. Reoccurring revenue model versus, customer churn versus, I think you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
like tell me a little bit more about what you're seeing in the industry and kind of this shift.
Well, there's been a significant shift over probably the last 10 years is where it's really accelerated. And it's understanding that, while net new business is important, it's that install base. Okay. You've got to take care of this install base because very quickly in a recurring revenue model, what you're going to find is your install base is going to dwarf within a few years the net new business you're bringing in each year. And if you're not paying appropriate attention to it, putting the right resources on it, but as I point out to them, most importantly, if you're not ensuring you're delivering the value that customer expects, okay, you're going to be in trouble. Then you're going to face churn. You're not going to get the upsell, cross-sell that you wanted because most of these companies use a land and expand. And I have to remind them, landing is not where we're, headed, guys. We want the expansion. So it's critical we land on the right deal that we can execute on and really blow them away with the value we deliver. Then the expand happens. And when you build this machine up, and again, I build it around the value lifecycle model, which by the way, that model was developed with buying organizations. Several major buying organizations came to me and said, Steve, we're pretty good at buying office supplies, and we can squeeze every dime out of this, but we've got mission critical suppliers, ones that we need a long-term relationship with. And that model doesn't work really well. And that's where the idea of the value life cycle, really came from, was working with those organizations. And the underpinning from the customer side was the desire for an ongoing business relationship. Well, that's the underpinning of any recurring revenue model. Okay. And so that's how this has kind of, evolved to the point where it is right now.
And value, the idea of value. So
Mhm.
this, I think, also makes what you're doing pretty unique in the marketplace. Like this is I believe you said your third value-based company that you've
Mhm.
started, and it's been all based on kind of building off of the previous work, I
Mhm.
believe, and it's
Yep.
gone further and further in terms of capability, what you're able to accomplish, what you're able to offer in terms of value, of course. You started at value, you're building on it. Like what's next? Where does this go?
Well, I'm not sure yet because there's still plenty of room in the journey because there's
Absolutely.
still lots and lots of misunderstandings about value.
Mhm.
What's next for me is I've got a book coming out here in this is the fourth in a series, by the way.
Awesome.
It was called Must Win Deals,
Mhm.
and why we lose them. That's the Must Win Deal series, and this is the fourth one called The Painless Negotiation. And I really challenged the concept that even with really big complex deals that the negotiation has to be painful, because it doesn't. And that's going to be out in October. It'll be on Amazon both in paperback and on Kindle version, and it follows the previous three, which were, again, Must Win Deals. Introduce the four big things we as sellers do that make it hard for customers to choose us. The second one was the irresistible value proposition,
Mhm.
how you articulate it, not in your language, in the customer's language, so they can easily digest it, socialize it. The third one was the compelling proposal. And in that
Mhm.
one, I go into how, guys, your proposal's got to sell for you when you're not there. And
Yeah.
it can't tell your story. Okay. It's got to tell their story for them because they're the
Mhm.
ones struggling with buying. And we condensed it down to literally 5 slides. And I've had clients close deals well north of $1 billion
Amazing.
on 5 slides. Okay. But the slides were about the customer. It told their story. The decision was made on 5 slides. Now the contract, was this thick when they were
Of
done,
course.
but that's okay. That's what I call the administrivia. The decision was made. So where I'm going next is I've really, as I mentioned, started getting extremely interested in a number of technology companies that are looking to
Mm.
really ramp, okay, quickly up to some sort of exit strategy. And I've been working with more and more of them, and it's a really exciting place to be. Okay, and I love working. I've always loved working with salespeople because I love
Mhm.
working with people who are trying to make something happen. When you couple that with an entrepreneurial organization and the whole organization is trying to make something happen, that's a lot of fun. And I've been at this a long time. And you know what? Right now, I like having clients that are fun.
Man, you are a lot of fun. I'm excited. Like I love what you're doing here. And value life cycle, I mean the value that you're giving, of course, but also like it feels to me, just your energy, it feels like you're in it with your clients. Like for real, like you understand what it means to win these deals and to
Hmm.
create great deals where both sides are winning and are having things that are executable, deliverable. Like it just makes for a better life in business, it sounds like it just feels better.
Oh, it not only feels better, it's easier.
Oh
Believe
yeah.
it or not, it's easier. Look, I often joke, and I think I may have mentioned this before,
Hmm.
but one of the things I've seen, particularly in the technology space, more than any other
Hmm.
industry that I've consulted in, is that we feel like we always have to have the answer.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, I'm not that smart. And when I got in sales, if I always had to have the answer, I'd have gotten the hell out of sales because I'm like, man,
Yeah.
I ain't got the answers. But you know what? The best salespeople, and in fact, the best business leaders that I've met, okay, don't have all the answers, but man, they've got the right questions,
Yeah.
you know, and that's what it all leads to.
Hmm.
And our job, whether I'm consulting with a client trying to bring them value, or let's say you're trying to sell to a
Mhm.
company, our job is to ensure that we understand them, where they are, where they're trying to go, and we paint a clear picture on
Hmm.
how we're going to help them get there. And
Yeah.
by the way, consuming, licenses or, installing your technology is not the end point. Okay.
Yeah.
It's once it's there, what is it going to deliver for them? That's the target that we're aiming for.
Absolutely amazing. Well, Steve, I just have to say this has been awesome having you on the show today and learning more about what you're doing and really how you're helping your clients and I would say your niche in the value sector and also your books. I mean, on the fourth one coming out. I mean, so how do people connect with you and your team? How do they consume your content? Like how do they get in touch?
Okay, so first off, the books are on Amazon. You go to Steve Thompson must
Mhm.
hyphen win deals, and you can see the whole series up there. My website is www.valuelifecycle.com. And I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to connect with you. And on there, you can see a number of the blogs and posts that
Mhm.
I've been putting up over the years. But please feel free to reach out to me directly. My email is steve@valuelifecycle, that's one word.com, or you can text me on my cell. It's 678-522-9964. And I'd welcome the opportunity to chat with you about what some of your challenges are and see if there's a way we can work together.
Awesome. Well, Steve, again, appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing more about your background and really what gets you going in your mission. And to the audience, as always, thank you for tuning in. Hope you got a lot of value out of this. Hope you learned a lot and had some fun. We did. If you did, though, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We have many more value-based entrepreneurs and business leaders coming up, and I definitely don't want you to miss a thing. And Steve, thanks again for coming on the show. It has been a pleasure.
Oh, Adam, it's been my pleasure. I thoroughly enjoyed it.